Alright, hello, Cookies here. It is time to talk about the raid. Raid is out tomorrow as of making this video, and we are going to go through Bigwigs, and I'm just going to walk you guys through my setup process for each boss in the new raid. We're going to start off with Eranog, and I did, unlike the dungeon Bigwigs walkthroughs, these bosses have a lot more to them, a lot more going on, a lot more things because it's longer boss fights. So I took down some notes of just the important abilities, and we're basically just going to talk about those. And I will have some examples of the abilities using Mythic Trap here, which Mythic Trap, I'll have a link to it down in the description or in a pinned comment or both. And it will just go over each of the bosses and cover very easy to follow strategy points and stuff. So it just shows like video side by side with tooltips and stuff like that. And it's a super good website for just getting familiarized with the boss before you actually go in there, or even after you've seen the boss once or twice and you just need to get a better grasp on things while you don't have to actively be in combat with the boss. So we are going to filter it to healer only. It really doesn't cut down too much. It usually just takes away like the tank mechanic. But other than that, we're going to start with Eranog. And the first ability that is going to be the most important in this fight, is I'm going to skip some of these, is Incinerating Roar. Incinerating Roar is going to be something that he uses every so often during the fight, and it just does unavoidable raid-wide damage, and also applies a dot on every single player in the entire raid. So this is going to be where major healing cooldowns are being used. So if you're pugging or your guild is not using like coordinated healing cooldowns, this is where you'd want to be planning all of your healing cooldowns around, is Incinerating Roar. So we're going to go into Bigwigs, and we are going to find Incinerating Roar because that's going to be very important. And I believe we are going to activate a countdown timer for this so that we know when it's going to happen. And then another thing we can do is, by default, I have my bars set to, let me find them real quick. I guess I could just find it in the boss. So we go to Incinerating Roar, and then the colors. So I have my default set to this gray color for my bars. And what you can do for an ability like this, if you want to know, if you want extra visual indications of when this ability is going to happen, is you can color this bar differently. So I'll usually use like a bright red for very important abilities, and then I will use, and I don't use emphasize bars, so I'm just going to leave that one alone. And then basically what it would look like is, it's not going to show it, but these gray bars, one would turn into a red bar. So I believe here's the default option. So you go to options in Bigwigs, and then there's just these right here, and you would just change bars, normal, and emphasize colors. And that's what the default is. And then when you go into specific abilities, that's what allows you to change the specific color for that ability. So usually for raid, I'll do very important like healing cooldown based abilities, like the things that are going to do the most damage to the raid that we're watching out for. That's going to be red. And then minor abilities where we can use like one healing cooldown here and there, or it's just something where we'll want like still good healing throughput, but we might not put a cooldown there, I'll color yellow. And then other things, I might use other colors and stuff like that. So I usually try to find something that I can color red and something I can color yellow. Which, speaking of the next ability, we have Flame Rift. So Flame Rift is going to be the first ability you see probably in this encounter, and it's going to be all these circles spawn around a cluster of players. You need to group up together, and then you drop a pool of fire on the ground. It does damage to you, and then spawns an ad out of it. The ads fixate people. So there's two things here that we need to adjust. The first one is going to be the Flame Rift. So we want a notification for that, or a color for that. So again, we are going to, this is going to be something where, again, it only goes on certain players. So we're going to set it to only when on me. And then we're going to set the sound warning to the PvP flag taken sound. This is the noise that I use when I get when it's a mechanic that when I get targeted by it, I need to do something with it. I need to go somewhere. I need to move. I got to drop it off somewhere, something like that. That's where I use the flag taken PvP sound. And then we are going to color it yellow, like I mentioned before, because it's like the other heavy hitting damage ability outside of Incinerating Roar. And then, I didn't mean to close it there. And then lastly, for this boss fight, we have Phase 2, or the Army of Flame, right here, Stage 2. And this is going to be, when the boss reaches 100 energy, he's going to go into the middle of the room, become immune to damage, and spawn all these adds. And the important part for us is when Stage 2 begins, he is going to do unavoidable raid-wide damage, and I think it increases in damage, or it's just a consistent dot that's on the entire raid until you're out of Stage 2. So it's going to be another place where you're going to want to probably fit some healing cooldowns. So it's probably going to be Incinerating Roar and Army of Flame, or Phase 2, is going to be where most of your healing cooldowns get used. And then Flame Rift is where you're just going to make sure you put a lot of throughput into your rotation and stuff like that, making sure you have a lot of things active and ready to go. So for Army of Flame, I don't necessarily need to like change the sound of this or anything, because it's just based off of the boss's energy, so it's very easy to just see, okay, when he hits 100 energy, we're going to have to deal with this. But I will change Greater Flame Rift, which is a mythic mechanic. It's the same thing as Flame Rift, but it spawns a different type of add. So we're going to also set Only When on Me, and then same thing, just put it to the PvP sound. Alright, and that is it for Eranog. Again, you can see the rest of his abilities by going through this. I'm going to keep this short and just go through the abilities that I think are very important as a healer to go through. And then the rest of the boss fight you can check out, or it's something where you can kind of learn on the fly. So, next boss up is going to be Terros. And the first ability that we are going to talk about is Concussive Slam or Seismic Assault. They're kind of both combined. So we have Concussive Slam and Seismic Assault, which is the debuff that happens after he does this ability. So he's going to do this beam on the tanks. That's not that important. But the important bit is that when he kills these pillars right here, the tanks are going to aim this beam into pillars. And then depending on how many pillars break, each pillar does unavoidable raid-wide damage to the entire party. And then also puts a dot on the entire raid for a small duration. So we're going to be wanting to know when this ability is happening so that we can prepare for when those pillars are going to break. So we're going to go in here, Vault of the Incarnates, Terros, and we have Concussive Slam, Tank Line. So we probably, I'm not sure if I want to enable a countdown yet for that or not. I think we'll wait because it's probably an ability that happens a lot, so having a countdown timer might be a bit annoying. But we are going to change the color of this ability and make it the yellow color, because there is a, not necessarily a more important ability, but there is an ability that is going to be causing us some trouble that we're probably going to be wanting to be a bit more aware of, because this is happening more frequently. So the yellow bar is for the ability that's happening more frequently but does raid-wide damage, and then the red bar is for the thing that happens like every minute or 2 minutes on an interval that will deal lots of damage to the raid. So we have that set up, and then the next ability is going to be Rock Blast, which Rock Blast is, it puts a giant circle on one random player. I believe it is up at the top. Where is it? It's right here, Rock Blast. So this puts a giant soak on a random player, and then everybody needs to stand along the edges of it in higher difficulties, and then the whole raid takes damage from the soak. So we're going to be wanting to be aware of when that happens. So for that, we have Rock Blast. We're going to set a countdown timer for that. And then, actually I'm going to leave the countdown timer off because I'm going to check through one more ability real quick. And then we will just make the alert sound for that will be, I think we'll also leave the alert sound blank. I might change it to something else, but we're going to mainly just set the bar colors. I think that's the main thing about Raid that I like to change, is the bar colors, because that's what helps me be more visually aware of things. So we'll set that up for now. And then other than this, I believe there is one more ability that's somewhat important for like positioning, which is going to be the things that spawn pillars. Where is it at? It's going to be Awakened Earth right here. certain players get targeted by these arrows on their head, and they need to drop them in specific locations depending on where you're coordinating it for your group, and that's what drops the pillars that the tanks then need to break. So we should set a notification for that, which is right here, Awakened Earth, and then we would set only when on me, and then we would change the noise to the flag taken PvP sound. Same reason as the first boss. It's a mechanic that we're going to need to do something with. We're going to need to move with it. Cool. And then I think other than that, for a countdown timer, I'm trying to think what I would want for a countdown timer. It's probably going to be the thing that spawns random fragments up from the ceiling, because you can kind of bait the fragments. Is it Shattering Impact right here? No, that's not it. Yeah, I guess this is it. This is the... Yeah, he targets an area on the floor, and then you want to run away and ideally bait these swirlies not right next to the boss. So we'll set a countdown timer for Shattering Impact, because that'll be important to get into a good spot for that when it's going off. And I think that is it for Terros. So again, just as a quick recap, we have Concussive Slam and Seismic Assault. That's like 2 in the same ability. That's the Tank Beam. That's important to know about. And then Rock Blast, which is the big raid soak that everyone needs to stand in. And then lastly, the Awakened Earth is the thing that targets us that we need to do something with. All right, next up we have... I'm actually going to go over Sennarth, which is the spider boss, before we go over Primal Council. So for Sennarth, we have... the first thing is going to be Chilling Blast, which is, if I refresh myself, it puts a circle on every single player, and then you just need to spread out and not overlap the circles. And of course, this is going to do a decent amount of raid-wide damage because all players, as you can see here, are debuffed with this. So it will do unavoidable raid-wide damage. So we will set up for Chilling Blast right here, and I'll also just probably automatically set a countdown for this because it seems very valuable. And then probably not going to change the sound. And then we'll make the bar color. This one will be the... I'm trying to remember... Yeah, this will just be the red bar because there's not another ability that we need to worry about too much. So this will probably be the big raid damage ability that's happening. And then the next thing is the Chilling Aura, which is during the intermission phase. It is just these big spiders that spawn, this big one right here that you can see. The longer that it's alive, it just does ramping raid damage for it just pulses raid damage as long as it's alive, and the damage keeps increasing the longer it's alive. So just being aware that that's going on is important. We don't need to set like a timer for it or anything, or a notification. It's just going to be something that when the ads are alive, be aware that the raid is going to take ever-increasing damage. And then, similarly, in Phase 2, we also have Pervasive Cold, which is just the boss is going to gain a perpetual damage increase over time, which means that every single Chilling Blast that we just talked about, the thing where the whole raid needs to spread out, that's going to do ever-increasing damage the longer the fight goes on. So it's kind of a kill the boss before she kills you mechanic, and that's where it's going to be very important to pay attention to Chilling Blast. So I think the fight is going to heavily revolve around Chilling Blast. So other than that, there is one other mechanic in here that like targets you and you're going to want to be aware of. It's this Enveloping Webs. So we should set something up for that. Just to show you the overview of it, Enveloping Webs targets random players, and then for the next like 6 seconds, you're going to drop webs at your feet, and you don't want to do what's shown in this video, which is drop the webs right on top of other people or in front of other people. You want to drop them to where other people aren't getting hit by them, because it applies a stacking debuff to them that we don't want. So we will set up something for Enveloping Webs, which is right here, and we'll do only when on me. And then the flag taken PvP sound. Cool. And I think that is it for this boss fight. I don't think we need to worry about too much else. Let's see. This also does raid-wide damage, it looks like, right here. Gossamer Burst. It's a grip that she does, and it looks like it inflicts unavoidable damage to everyone in the raid. Seems like a decent amount, so this is what we'll set up as the yellow bar that I mentioned earlier. So we have the red bar set up. This will be our yellow bar ability. There we go. And it looks like that is it for now. Suffocating Webs is the same thing. Targets several players with spider webs. Inflicting damage. Is that the same thing as Enveloping Webs? It looks like it's just a little bit different. So we should set up a separate notification because it looks like she stops doing Enveloping Webs and instead does Suffocating Webs. So we'll set up an only when on me. And then again, the PvP sound, only because it appears that it doesn't overlap with Enveloping Webs. If they do overlap, then we want to change this to a different sound that's unique, just so that we can differentiate the two. All right, and that is it for Sennarth. So now we'll move to Primal Council. And now Primal Council has like different bosses that each do something. So we basically are just going to find one ability for each boss that's the most important, and that's going to be the main things that we're going to track. So the first one is going to be Earthen Pillar right here. So this just spawns pillars, and then as long as pillars are active, they're going to deal ticking damage to the raid. So this isn't going to be something we need to be too aware of, but it's going to be something where when there's pillars alive, the raid's taking damage. So I'll probably just leave it default for now, and we'll focus our attention on other abilities since this is pretty noticeable. So next up, we're going to talk about Conductive Mark. This is the pillar spawning. And then Conductive Mark is going to be everybody gets a debuff, and then you need to clear your debuff without overlapping your circle on top of other players. Otherwise, the debuff just keeps reapplying and spreading and becoming a really big problem. And you usually reset your debuff by walking up to pillars, or in heroic and normal difficulty, you can just let it time out. So this is going to be probably the big, or one of the big mechanics that does unavoidable raid-wide damage, because the whole raid is taking damage while they're doing this. And then I believe also whenever you clear your debuff, it's going to do raid-wide damage for every single person that clears. So knowing when Conductive Mark is out is going to be very important. So we'll set that up as our... I think we'll set it up as our yellow bar ability, because there is one more that seems more dangerous. As far as I know, I did not do testing for this boss, so I'm not absolutely sure. So for now, Conductive Marks will be our yellow bar ability, and then we'll also do a countdown timer for this, because this seems important to be able to pre-spread before this ability goes out, so we're not panicking. All right, and then next up we have Meteor Axes, which targets 2 players with giant soaks, and you need to split the raid into 2 groups and soak both of these circles. So it's basically going to be melee soaks one and range soaks the other one. And again, this is going to do a pretty fair amount of raid-wide damage. I don't know if it's going to be as much as Primal Blizzard, so we're also just going to set a yellow bar for this. And what we can do to not confuse the two abilities is we can actually go back and change Conductive Marks. This is what I usually do if there's like extra abilities that I want to color the bars for, is we'll make this one like a purple bar. And what that means for me personally when I see a purple bar is it's some kind of like raid-wide mechanic, usually involving some kind of movement or debuff or some kind of thing that you have to clear as a raid, like things like that. So that'll be good for Conductive Mark. And then now we can move that yellow bar color onto Meteor Axes instead. So now when we see that yellow bar, we're going to know that's Meteor Axes and purple is Conductive. So we go to colors and we're going to switch this one to the yellow. Probably won't make a notification or anything. And then the last ability is going to be Primal Blizzard, which is going to be the really, really heavy-hitting ability that the bosses do. I'm sorry if you can hear my cat. He's so noisy today. Okay, so Primal Blizzard basically is going to apply an ever-stacking debuff on players that increases in damage done, and then they have to step into fire on the ground in order to reset their debuff, but then it starts stacking back up again. So they're going to be taking damage while they're gaining stacks, and then they're also going to take damage when they have to step into the fire to clear. So this is probably going to be one of the abilities that you're going to really want to be pumping a lot of throughput healing and probably using healing cooldowns for. So this is going to be like the big ability that we're going to set up things for. So Primal Blizzard, this is going to be set as our red bar. All right, so I believe that is it for Primal Council for now. So next up, we are going to talk about Dathea, the Ascended. And we're going to move over there on Mythic Trap. And the first ability with Dathea is going to be Conductive Mark, very similar to the Primal Council. Players get a debuff, and you have to remove your debuff in some way, depending on the difficulty. So this is going to be something that's pretty important. I believe it just targets a certain amount of players. It's not everyone in the raid, but let me check. Marks the player with lightning, inflicting damage and increasing damage for 10 seconds, and the effect stacks. So I believe maybe everybody does get this, and you have to clear it before you go over to the other platforms. So this may be another big raid-wide damage thing. So I think for now we're going to set this as the yellow. This will be our yellow bar, and then we'll also enable a countdown for this one. And then lastly, we will also set it to only when on me, in case it doesn't target everybody in the raid, and then we're going to make the warning sound. I'm going to make it the sound for pressing a defensive, because it's something that does a lot of damage over time, so we're going to want to press defensive when it's targeting us. And I use Retro SFX 183. Sounds like that. When I hear that noise, I press my defensive. All right, and then other than that, we have Cyclone, which is a pull-in, and it deals, it's just like a big vortex. Let me show the video for it. So where is it? Cyclone, here it is. So she's just going to draw players in and then do unavoidable raid-wide damage the entire time this is happening. So this is probably going to be another big damage event that's happening. This is where you're going to want to be using like mobile healing cooldowns or just have a lot of throughput ready for. So for the sake of simplicity, we're going to have this be our red bar ability. So Cyclone will be the red bar ability. And don't need to set a specific sound for it or anything like that. And then lastly, another important ability that's kind of like a phase transition ability is going to be Coalescing Storm, which is when she spawns and she spawns adds on a separate platform, and then you need players to go over to that platform, and they'll take a lot of damage while they're over on that platform, and they need to kill all the adds over there and then return back over to the main platform. So this is going to be where whoever is the healer that goes over here is probably going to use their cooldowns, and then the healer that stays behind is probably going to be the healer or healers that are using their cooldowns during Cyclone, and then you kind of alternate back and forth, because you're going to be alternating groups because you can't keep going across multiple times in a row because you take a stacking debuff. So Coalescing Storm will be our other ability that we check, and I'm going to set this one to have the purple bar like we talked about before, since this is kind of like a raid-wide thing that we need to just be aware of. It's not necessarily like a damage, because it might not apply to us if our group isn't going over, for instance, but it's just something to be aware of. And I think that's it. I don't think we need to set any sound notifications or anything for it. Let's see what else we have. Do we have anything else important? Stormbolt, I believe, is interruptible. Let me double check. Stormbolt, interruptible, 2-second cast. So don't need to worry about that. And it looks like that is it for this boss. So very simple. And now we'll go to Kurog Grimtotem, which is going to be the last boss in this video, and then we're going to cover the last two in a separate video, just so that it's not drawing on for more than 30 minutes pretty much. So Grimtotem has a lot of stuff going on, but it's based in phases. So you might see me set this up a little bit differently than other bosses, and that's because each phase is individual and the abilities don't like overlap with each other until the end of the fight. So basically he goes into different areas in the room that you pull him to, and then he gets buffs and changes the fight mechanics based on which section you're in. There's a fire, frost, earth, and storm section of the room. And first we're going to talk about fire. So we're going to go over each section and just talk about which important mechanic or mechanics are active in that zone. So for fire, we only really have Raging Inferno. That's really the only important thing that happens, which is going to be somewhere in here, right here, Raging Inferno. So he's going to spawn, there's going to be lava pools on the floor, and then they're going to get these weird looking orbs in them. When that happens, people need to stand in them and soak them until they disappear. So raid-wide damage is going to be happening there. Other than that, there is a frontal right here. And since we set up frontals for Mythic Plus, we're going to do the same thing here just to be made aware that, hey, a frontal's happening, be careful. So the frontal is going to be called, it just says add frontals, but I don't know what he's actually casting. Let's see. Looks like Molten Rupture is another frontal, so I think we'll just set it up for that. I think because that's like the boss's frontal, not the adds frontal, but I think that's more important anyways. So we'll set this up as the frontal noise, which is 190. And then looks like the fire ability we were looking for does not appear to be here, which is Raging Inferno. It might be because it's under this right here. It looks like it might be under this. Searing Carnage. So I guess we're just going to have to leave that one blank for now. And then we will move on to Frost, which for Frost we're going to do Absolute Zero and Biting Chill. So Biting Chill is going to be something where if you get afflicted, you're going to want to know and press a defensive immediately because it's going to hurt very badly. Also going to want to track this on other players. So we will do the defensive noise for this one. And then Absolute Zero is very similar to the fire phase. It's just going to be a giant like group soak that needs to be dealt with, which is right here, Absolute Zero. So he's going to spawn swirlies, and then it's just two groups, just like the Primal Council. So Absolute Zero, we'll set that to probably not a countdown, but I am going to make the noise. Or we're not going to change the noise either. Sorry, I got distracted. We are going to use the red bar for this one. And then for the Earth phase, we are going to just set something for Enveloping Earth. We'll probably set, we don't need to set like any noise or countdown for this. It's something that we're going to be wanting to put into our unit frames, so just make sure you're tracking this debuff on your unit frames. It just targets several players, and then they get a huge healing absorb that you need to heal through. So it's a lot of single target healing. And then for lightning, we have Orb Lightning, which is another single target healing thing. It's just going to target specific players, and they're going to need help getting through it. Looks like it's not even listed on here. Wondering, might be here, right? Is it Lightning Crash? No, it's not that. That's the next ability I was going to set for. So Lightning Crash is going to be the big damage ability in this phase. So we're going to set that as our yellow bar. This is just going to apply to random players, and then the players closest to them are also going to be taking damage. Again, you can see that in Mythic Trap, which is going to be right here. So he debuffs players with arrows on their heads, and then the closest player to them also takes damage. And then in this phase, we also have what you just saw, which is Thunder Strike. That's this all these circles that spawn on the floor, and the raid needs to stand in them and soak them. So this is going to be like our red bar ability for the Storm phase. And again, because the phases happen independently, we can set, multiple red bars across the fight or multiple yellow bars in each phase. He does do all the mechanics at the end of the fight, but that's okay. All right, and then in stage 2 or phase 2, we have Freezing Tempest is really important, which is going to be this like safe zone that spawns around an ad. You need to stand in it to take reduced damage, but it's still going to do a lot of raid-wide damage. So we will enable a countdown timer for that one. And then we will also set up a probably a purple bar for this one, just because we need to move into the add space. And then we have Elemental Presence, which we don't need to change anything for. It's just something that we're going to be wanting to be made aware of. It's not even in here. But Elemental Presence is basically for as long as each of the adds are alive in Phase 2, because you're going to be dealing with certain adds, they're going to be doing increasing damage while they're alive. So just something to be aware of. And then lastly, we have Primal Attunement, which is the same exact thing as Elemental Presence, except it's the boss. So now the boss has all of the mechanics from all 4 altars at the same time, and he does ever-increasing raid damage. So it's just going to be another thing that you're going to want to be aware of. You don't need to set anything up for it. It's just a kill the boss before he kills you, and use healing cooldowns as they come up in this last phase. And that is it for Kurog Grimtotem. So I hope that covered the first majority portion of the raid pretty well. We'll go over the last 2 bosses in the next video, so make sure you check that out. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching. See ya.